We will be adding a ammo pickup, which you can see right here. Hey guys, welcome back to another Bigger Games tutorial. In this series we're going through and remaking Call of Duty Zombies with completely free assets, all in Unity, and providing you all the files for free. You can use these files for whatever you want, and in this tutorial we will be going over enemy drops. We will be adding a ammo pickup, which you can see right here is a little icon that spins on the ground until it is almost about to expire, and at that point it will start flashing and it will increase your ammo for whatever guns you have. So when we walk over it, we also have a sound to pick up the item, and it has a little lighting effect so you can see it better, but that's what we will be adding this time. So let's jump back to where we started off last time and create this enemy pickup. The first thing we're going to do is import the new objects that we have. So in the description you'll find the download links for the sound that we're going to use and the model that we're going to use for the pickup item. And I'm going to put the sound in our sounds folder, and in the resources folder I'm going to create a new folder called pickup items, and inside of this folder is where I'm going to drag our model, and I'm just going to drag the whole folder called holder into our UI. And if you double click on that folder you will see all of the assets that we imported, and I'm going to drag the object into our scene, and you can see that we have a model of an ammo box come in, and I'm going to rename that in our hierarchy to ammo pickup. And let's resize it so it's the correct size for a pickup. That's about right. And then we're going to modify this object from the model that we imported. So it will have an animator component. We can get rid of that by clicking the cog in the inspector and remove component. And the first thing I'm going to add is a light, because when the pickup drops we want the player to be able to see it even if they can't directly see the object. So I'm going to add a light and make sure the type is point light, and I'm going to increase the intensity to say 2. That's all we need to do here. And then when it is almost expiring, when the pickup is about to disappear, we will flash that light. The next thing we are going to add is a box collider, and this is required to know when our player collides with the box. So under the inspector tab in the box collider that we just added, click is trigger. And what is trigger does is makes it so you can pass through the object. So if it's not a trigger you will collide with it and it'll push back against you, but if it's a trigger you'll just walk through it and it will call the trigger collider functions, and that's where we will tell it what to do when we collide with this object. So next we're going to add 2 scripts to this. One of the scripts will be the same throughout all of our pickup items, and then another script will define exactly what this pickup item does, because we want a different sound for the different pickup items so you know what you're picking up, and obviously the different pickup items will do different things, like add ammo or give you extra points or anything that you want to do. So the first script I called pickup item, and I'm just going to drag that onto our ammo pickup object in our hierarchy, and that will attach it to our object. And again, that's just a blank script. You won't have this script, so what you will want to do is click on the add component, go to new script, and add it that way. But this is just a blank script, so we will go through and I will show you everything that's in there. And the second script that we are going to add I called the ammo box pickup. I'm going to add that the same way. So now we have our 2 scripts attached to our object. We have our box collider, we have our light. We took away the animator because we don't need that. We are going to animate it through the scripts, and we're all set here. So now let's jump into the scripts and start telling the object what to do when it's in the game. So to open our script, click on your ammo pickup item and go to the pickup item script, double click that. So what we are going to do here is add a couple of variables to define the behavior of this object. So first we want to be able to tell how long the object is going to be visible to the player. So I'm going to add a couple timers here. The first will be just timer, and the second will be flash timer. And this will determine how fast the object will flash when it's about to disappear. And next we need variables to tell it how fast we're going to flash the object and how fast it will spin. So I'm going to add a couple more floats. One will be flash duration, and the next will be spin speed. And then last we need a variable to hold the rotation of the object, because we are going to be incrementing it through each update of the object, so we need a variable to hold that value. So I'm going to create a float just called rotation. Now in the update function, the first thing we will want to do is increment our timer, and to do this we just call upon the time.delta time. And this will tell us how much time has passed in between each function call, because the update function is called automatically. And the next thing I'm going to do is add an if statement that separates the states of our object. So when it first spawns, it will sit there and just spin, and then when it's almost about to expire, it will flash, and when it's expired, we want to delete it. So I'm going to tell it if timer is greater than 10, and this is the state that we'll just tell the object to spin in place. I'll just write out all of the ifs right now. And next we want to tell it what to do when it is almost about to expire. So I'm going to add else if greater than 0, timer greater than 0. Then we will tell it to flash. And then finally else, which will be called when it is 0 or less than 0. Because that is the only way it can pass through to this last else statement, and we will destroy the game object. Now in this first if statement we want to tell the object to rotate in place, so we are going to tell it to increment rotation. So rotation plus equals, and then we want to give it our spin speed, which we will define in the editor, and we can change that value until it's at a speed that we think looks good. And I'm going to multiply that by time.delta time. And this will make sure that in between each update, even if the times differ, it will still be a continuous spin with the same speed. And for that to affect our rotation of the object, we need to assign that to our rotation. So outside of the if statement, because we'll be using this rotation increment in separate parts of the if statement, so we will assign that to the rotation outside, so it will happen every time. Transform.rotation equals, and here I'm going to create a variable called a quaternion, which basically is what a vector 3 is to position, but to a rotation. It just tells the game how the object is rotated in reference to the game world. So quaternion.Euler. Now we have a vector 3 that we can define our rotation. This vector 3 is what you would see in the UI editor, and this is probably how you visualize the rotation. So here we want to rotate it on the y-axis just so it spins in place. So here I'm going to tell it to apply the rotation that we defined earlier, which is our variable rotation, and leave the other x and z coordinates at 0. Now let's go back and tell it how to flash when it's almost about to disappear. So here I am now going to increment our flash timer, and one thing I just noticed up here, I said plus equals, but we are going to set the timer to a value that we want to decrease from, so that should actually be minus equals. And same with our flash timer, minus equals time.delta time. And then here we want to say if flash timer is less than or equal to 0, inside of this if statement it will be called each time the flash timer expires. So if we set the flash duration rather to 1 second, let's say, every second this will be called, and then we want to set the flash timer back to the flash duration, and it will keep being called. And inside here we want to trigger the visibility of the object. So every second, or whatever we define the flash duration to be, we will disable the mesh render and disable the light that we added to it so it blinks in the game. So here I'm going to create a function down here to handle this, and I'm just going to call it flash. So this is where we will disable and enable the render and the light, and we'll do that after we finish up with the update function, but I'll call that here. So it will be called each time the flash timer is 0 or less than 0. And also, when it's about to expire, I want to set the object to rotate faster. So I'm going to take this rotation and redefine it down here, but I want it to be faster, so I'm going to double the speed. So now it will call the flash, which will enable and disable it, and it will also spin in place at twice the speed that we had before. So let's define what it needs to do to flash the renders. So I'm going to create a mesh render object as a reference, and I'll find the get component in parent. I'll find the mesh render, and now we have a reference to that render. So now I'm going to access the variable that will allow us to enable and disable the mesh render, which is called enabled, and I'm going to set this to whatever state the render is not. So I'm going to reference that enabled again, but I'm going to add not in front of it. So when this is enabled, it will turn it off, and when it's disabled, it will turn it back on. And we want to do the same thing for the light. So let's get a reference to the light and do the exact same thing. And this will, again, turn on the render and the light when it's disabled and turn it off when it's enabled. And we can define how fast that happens with our flash duration variable. And now that we have the flash function, I'm going to add one more function in the script, and I will call it void disable pickup. This will handle what happens when we run it into the object, and because we have an audio source, which actually I forgot to add, so back in the Unity window, add component audio source, back to the script, and we need this function because when we interact with the object, when we collide with the object, we can't just delete it because we'll play a sound when we pick up the object to tell the player that we picked it up. But if we just delete the object, it won't play that sound because it plays through the audio listener of the object, and it'll take some time. So in this disable pickup function, we will disable everything so we don't collide with it multiple times, and then we will tell it to destroy it once we are done playing any sounds that we need to. So when we disable the pickup, we want to do the same thing as we did in Flash, but we will also disable the collider, so we can't collide with it anymore. So I'm just going to copy and paste the renders, and I'm going to add one more, and it will be the box collider. And make sure it's get component and not get components, because get components will return an array, and we don't want an array, we just want a single instance. Box collider, then collider.enabled, and here we'll set it to false and not to the opposite of what the flag is at the time, because we just want it to be disabled instead of switching back and forth. So set all three of these variables to false. So now when we pick up the item, we can call this disable pickup from the other script that tells us what the item does when we pick it up, and it will disable the item so we can't pick it up multiple times. And finally, at the end, we will destroy the object. But we want to wait for the sound to play, and the sound is pretty short, but just in case you want to use your own sounds or a longer sound, I'm going to put 2 seconds. You can change this to whatever. If your sound's cutting off, then increase this, obviously. But that's it for this script, and this will be the generic script for any pickup item that you want to do. You will just have to define in the other script that we have what that pickup item is. So in the ammo box pickup, that is the other script that we created, we are going to tell it what the box actually is, what the pickup is. So like I said before, we're going to have an audio clip, and let's make it public so we can just drag and drop it in the editor. Public audio clip, pickup clip. And then I'm going to define what happens when the player interacts with the trigger object, because our box collider is set to a trigger. So we can access the function on trigger enter, which is a function set up with any trigger with any collider that has a trigger enabled, and this will be called whenever anything collides with it. So we need to tell it what happens when the player collides with it, because this will be called when anything with a rigid body collides with this object. So the first thing I'm going to do is add an if statement that says if other, which is our collider information that's passed to this function, .gameObject.tag is player, then we know that it's the player and we can interact with the object. And in this case, it is an ammo box pickup, so we need to add ammo to the player, and the way that we do that with our first-person controller is through the weapon manager. So I'm going to first get a reference to the weapon manager so I can add ammo to our variables that hold the information about our ammo. So I'm going to create a reference, and I'm going to find the component, find object of type, and weapon manager. And now we have a reference to our weapon manager. So in our weapon manager, we are going to create a function that adds ammo to the guns that we have, which we have not created yet, but I will create it next, and we are going to call that fill ammo. So whenever we collide with this object and it is the player, it will access the weapon manager and call the function fill ammo, which will add ammo to our player. Next, we want to play the sound. Audio.clip equals pickup clip. And we will play that, so we will say audio.play. And lastly, we need to disable our pickup, and that was the last function that we created in our pickup item script. So we need a reference to that script. So I'm going to create a reference. Pickup item equals get component in parent, and pickup item. So now we have our reference, and we can call the disable, and we can call the disable pickup, and that will disable our pickup, and it will give us enough time to play our audio clip. So next, let's go into the weapon manager and define what ammo to fill, and that will be based on the weapons that we currently have. So open up the weapon manager script, and here I have an empty function that I called fill ammo. The way that our ammo works, there is separate ammo magazines for each type of ammo. So we have our sniper ammo, we have our machine gun ammo, we have our rockets, and things like that. So usually when we buy ammo, we reference the weapon index of the item, but this time we are just going to go through all of the ammo types and assign a value to that ammo, and if that type of ammo doesn't exist in the guns that we are carrying, we will just check with the next type of ammo until we find which type of ammo, so we don't have to worry about the weapon index. For this, I'm going to need to reference our weapons in use. So we have an array in this script called weapons in use, and it holds the two objects that we have as our weapons, and inside those weapons we have a weapon index which defines what type of ammo we are going to use. So I'm going to go through each type of weapon and check the ammo. And for this, I'm going to use a for each statement, and the for each statement just cycles through all of the objects in an array that you define. So here I'm going to type for each, which takes the object type, which is a game object, that is the type of objects that are in our weapons in use, and we need to give it a reference name, and I'll call it gun in. And then we tell it what array it is in, which is weapons in use. And this will go through each weapon. In our case, we are holding two weapons, but if you wanted to have more weapons, then this would be universal for that as well. So here we are going to look back at our buy ammo script, which will tell us to buy ammo for a specific weapon index. So if we know the weapon index, we can create this variable that is based off the script on the weapon. So let's copy and paste that into our new function. So this script defines the magazines which are for a machine gun, and it might not be a machine gun that we are using. So when we try to assign this weapon script new, if the weapon script is not on that object, it will be a null value. So under that, I'm going to say if mags is not null, which will mean that our weapon accepts this type of magazine or this type of ammo. So I'm going to add 200 there, and also, since we will be going through each type of ammo, I'm going to return out of this function if we know that it's the correct magazine. And I'm going to do this for all the ammo types, so it will go through and find which ammo type that is correct and add it to our ammo. So to save time, I went through and added the shotgun bullets, the rockets, and the sniper bullets, and it will do that for each gun in our weapons in use. So that's all we need for our fill ammo function. that we called back in our ammo box pickup. So the last thing we need to do is tell the game when to drop these pickups, and that will be based on when the enemy is killed. So if we go to our enemy controller and find the death function, which is called when the enemy dies, this is where we are going to tell it when to add a pickup. So here I'm going to make it random when we drop the pickup for the player, and so I'm going to create two variables which will be integers, and one will be random drop, which will determine the percentage of times that a pickup is dropped when you kill an enemy, which would be random.range. And for this I'm going to set in between 0 and 10, and then also int random pickup, which will determine which pickup we're going to use. If we had multiple pickups, then it would pick a random one to drop. So this will be random.range. So this will be in between 0 and the amount of pickups that we have. And we'll want to create an array at the top of the enemy controller that defines or that holds the information about what pickups there are. So I'm going to add this public game object array of pickups, and then we can drag and drop any prefabs into this array and access it directly in the script. So when I randomize which pickup is being dropped, so I can just check that variable and see how many objects there are in it. So pickups.length. And here I'm going to subtract the pickups.length by 1. So then I'm going to tell it to instantiate the pickup item when the random drop is below a certain value. So if random drop, I'm going to say less than 2, so that means if it's 0 or 1, which will be about 10% of the time because it starts at 1 to 10, or you could do less than or equal to 1, it'd be the same thing. And I will instantiate a new pickup item. And this is where we will have our pickups at the location that was randomized. And we will also need to tell it the position and rotation. The position will want to put the position that the enemy died, and also we will want to raise it up a little bit because we don't want it sitting on the floor, we want it kind of hovering above. So I'm going to put transform.position plus new vector 3, and I'll put a 0.25 f to raise it off the ground just a little bit. And then we need a rotation, which we can add a quaternion.euler, and the rotation doesn't matter because we increment the rotation in our other script, so just put zeros. And that's all we need. So when the random drop is less than 2, it will drop a pickup item for the player. So that's everything we need for the scripting. If we go back into Unity, we need to drag our pickup item into the enemy controller script because it's accessed there. So if we go to one of our enemies, select the prefab, and we should have our enemy controller script, and we now have our pickups. We have our pickup ammo pickup here. I'm going to drag that into our prefabs folder so we have access to it. And back to our zombie prefab, we will want to drag our ammo pickup prefab into the enemy controller pickups array. So now it knows what to instantiate when we have our random number generator below a certain threshold. And then go to our ammo pickup item and select the prefab, which is right click, select prefab if there is an object in your scene. And here we will need to tell it what the audio clip is, and then we can define the timers and the duration and the spin speed and all of that. So next we need to tell the ammo box pickup what the pickup click sound is. So that was in our sounds folder. Reload pickup is the name, so drag that into the pickup clip. And now we have a sound associated to our ammo box pickup. And for timer, let's set it to 25 seconds. Let's set the flash timer to 0 so it will immediately start flashing once we hit our 10-second threshold at the end. And our flash duration will be 0.25. Let's set our spin speed to 100. And our rotation we don't need access to. Now we have our ammo pickup prefab, and it should drop when we kill an enemy about 10% of the time. So if we click play on our scene, and we have one right there, you can see the spinning. And let's see if it flashes when it gets close to disappearing. So you can see it flashing, the lights flashing on and off, and the mesh render is flashing on and off. And so you can see we kill an enemy and he has a drop. And when we go over it, you should see your bullets increase, and you should hear the pickup item sound that we have. And one thing that I notice is that it is casting shadows, and we don't need to use that extra processing to do that. We don't need a shadow on our pickup items, and it's even kind of distracting. So that's an easy fix. You can just go to the ammo pickup item that we have and click on cast shadows and receive shadows in the mesh render section of the inspector, and that will disable that, which we don't need. And remember to click the apply button on the prefab section, and that will save it to your prefab. So now we can take it out of our scene, and it should drop when we kill an enemy. And that's it for this tutorial. If you liked it, please help us out and click the like button, subscribe to us. We will continue to release these tutorial videos until we are completely done with the series, and we also release free assets from time to time, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our free assets or tutorials. And for next time, we will probably be adding perks or a pack-a-punch. I am not sure which we will do first. Let me know in the comment section what you want to see next, and we'll try to get to that. If you have any questions, let us know in the questions section. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.